All right, welcome back to the LeaderLink podcast. This is your host, Charles Heasley, and we've spent a few weeks now talking about some of the challenges with leadership development, and I wanted to spend one episode giving an overview about the way we ensure our leadership development programs are effective. Is this all of the right answers? Probably not, but this is what has worked for us and so many different kinds of organizations. First of all, what makes training work? Well, these aren't necessarily in any particular order, but the first thing that I can think of when I think of making an investment into something like this is, what do we want to get out of the investment? So the very first thing would be a clear set of goals for the program. I remember when I first went to my first leadership development program, I was so excited. I was a brand new leader. I'd been a sergeant for about a year. And I asked my lieutenant, I said, hey, what am I supposed to get out of this training? And she said that, well, since you promoted to sergeant, your name is not on a list. And in order to get you off that list, we have to send you to this training. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but I'm excited about this. What should I be looking for? What kind of skills, what kind of things did you find out? And she said, look, it's going to be a great program, but we're basically checking a box here. And I thought that was so sad, because they were not only having to make the investment, the financial investment to send me, they were having to cover my shifts. At the time I was working nights. That means you got to pull in people sometimes from, there's just a scheduling nightmare. So I think these kinds of things are most effective when we go into it knowing what is it that we want. For example, what kind of behaviors am I looking for? What kind of skills? Do we need to be a better communicator? What does better communication look like? How do I define that you've succeeded in that? Do you need to be a better delegator? What should you delegate? All these different things. What kind of organizational outcomes should we be looking for? Is it even possible for leadership development to affect organizational outcomes, such as higher morale, a bigger commitment to the organization, reduce turnover, those kinds of things? So there could be many different possible goals to set, but I think the first step is to go in knowing what you want those goals to be. And I recommend that the participant have a clear set of goals, but also their manager. What do they want to help get out of this training for their leader who's going through it? For example, for me, I was a brand new sergeant. It would have been helpful to know from my lieutenant, what are the key areas that we want you to improve in from leadership development? All right, so number one, clear goals for success. Number two, an accountability mechanism. The way we do it, we have two different kinds of accountability mechanisms. Number one, you're accountable to the group. If you show up and you don't do the work, then we're going to know it. And when everyone else has done the work, it's going to be uncomfortable. So peer pressure is a real thing, and it does work in these development programs. The second thing that I recommend when it comes to accountability is somebody at your organization, ideally the next level leader, whoever you report to. I want you to get them involved. In fact, one of the assignments when you go through one of the programs that I offer is that between each session, you meet with your boss and you let them know, here's what I'm learning. Here's the 7 to 14 day goal that I've set for myself, how to implement this in real time. I'm coming to you, letting you know what it is, but it's not just so that I'm doing what I was going to do with accomplishing these goals, but you know what to hold me accountable to. You know that if my goal is to provide more positive feedback to the different employees that I supervise, then you have an opportunity to check in with me on a regular basis and say, how is that going? Have you noticed any difference? Has there been any challenges? And we like to get that next level leader involved as an accountability mechanism, but also so that they can understand what kind of behaviors and skills to hold people accountable, and also, by the way, to learn from a little bit, because most of their bosses have never been to a comprehensive leadership development program such as the one we offer. All right, so the number 2 is accountability mechanisms. Number 3, I've said this many times, effective leadership cannot really be a one-time event. I say this, but I also am transparent. I do keynotes. I do half-day workshops. I do full-day workshops. I do multiple-day workshops. And the goal for those is I want to spark an idea. I would love to get somebody motivated to take on a new challenge for themselves to become a better leader. But here's the thing. In my experience, I've done week-long leadership development programs. And in my experience, when you try to condense a bunch of theory, and even if you do workshops and stuff, into a singular time frame, whether that's a day, 2, 3, a whole week, whatever it is, the problem is that the people going through it don't know what to apply. And you would think, well, they should apply everything. That's not 100% possible. Well, it's not necessarily reasonable to expect. I think that the good news about this is that most companies don't want to send employees, managers off to a really long training simply because they don't want to have that person miss work for that long. So that's actually a good news, because those long kinds of trainings aren't as effective. Sure, when I put on a 2 or 3 day program, I'm looking to not only give you some value, but also give you long-term tools. The problem is that you really have, as a participant, the obstacle of, okay, I've gathered 3 days of amazing information. I love it. I can't wait to do it. But then you go back to your day job and you've got all of the problems that have been stacking up since you've been gone. And you've got this new problem that comes onto your desk, and then this problem, and then all these different things. When are you going to find the time to implement it? And I think you can probably relate to me. I've been to so many conferences, so many trainings where I'm just so excited. But then I go back to my regular life and I don't implement it, or at least I don't implement all of it. So I remember when I was doing this week-long program for Texas Police Chiefs Association, these participants, they were just loving it because they realized, okay, this can help me. I can really do something with this. And then I get to the end of the week, and when I first started doing this, I would ask them, okay, if you could only choose one concept, one principle to apply, what would it be? And they struggled to answer because I had given them so much in a week. So what I started doing is I started writing it out on a big poster board. Here's all the different concepts we applied. And it was interesting because I could tell they didn't remember some of the nuts and bolts on some of the earlier stuff in the week. So here's the thing. I'm not trying to beat this to death. Leadership development is not effective, or not as effective, when you have it in a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, week long. Yes, I still provide those things, but it is most effective when we break it up into bite-sized chunks, short sessions. We give an idea, you take that idea and you run with it, you practice it, you come back and we talk about it. Bite-sized chunks. So the third tip is multiple interrelated workshops given in bite-sized chunks. This goes along with our fourth key to leadership development success: spaced repetition. It is the mother of all learning. My mentor, the one who taught me about spaced repetition, would often say or use the example of times tables. I can say, hey, what is 2 times 2? We know the answer is 4. What is 4 times 4? 16, and so forth. But when you start going beyond the times tables, which stopped at 12, people don't know the answer. because they repeatedly, over and over and over again, did 2 times 2, 4 times 4, 8 times 8, the easy ones. There's so many examples that I could give. Not to, I don't want to take up the time to do that right now in this video. We could talk about it later. But when we learn a new concept, we need to practice it multiple times for it to become part of our normal operating system. Because I've mentioned before, habits are hard to break. And if there's habits that we want to start, there's habits that we want to stop. And for an example, one of the habits that I see over and over again with leaders is the use of the word should. They should do this. They should know. That shouldn't be that way. And we picked that up pretty early on in our time together, and when we start talking about communication. But then it comes back around when we start talking about delegation. Well, they should know to do this task. Okay, well, great. Have you delegated it? Have you explained how to do it? Have you provided resources and support? All those things. It comes around when we talk about training. Again, there's this concept that other people should just know what it is we want, how to do it, why they should be doing it. And the word should is so pervasive in leadership that it almost becomes a joke as we go through the program, because we'll be talking and talking and talking, and then somebody will use the word should, and I'll be like, what'd you say? And they'll realize, oh my gosh, like even though we've hit it so many times, their habit says that people should do so. Spaced repetition is an essential component, because we're going to give you a ton of great information, but it is going to be those things that you hit over and over and over again that are going to lead to lasting behavior change. All right, so the fourth thing is spaced repetition. Number 5, application. This kind of ties back into accountability earlier, but as I mentioned, one of the things that I do is I ask them to apply a concept. They choose it. Again, we give them a lot of material. Each person in our class sets a 7 to 14 day goal. So if we are meeting every week, they set a 7-day goal. If we're meeting every 2 weeks, they set a 14-day goal. And in that period of time, I'm asking them to implement what they've learned. On top of that, I'm asking them to meet with their boss to share their experience about what they're learning. Is it going well? Are there challenges? That way the boss can provide some mentoring and support. And recently I was told by one of the folks going through a program I recently wrapped up, is it was in the expectations lesson. We have people write expectations. I give them different categories to write expectations. We workshop it out. Then they take it back to their organization and they finalize it, and then they implement it by giving the expectations to their people. And he said that he was meeting with his boss, who has never really had any kind of training like what we offer. And this guy was saying, yeah, I did this and this is what happened. And his boss said, holy cow, this works. And that was just so cool, because I think there is some skepticism about leadership development for a lot of the reasons we've talked about in the past few weeks. But when you're given the opportunity to apply what you've learned, practice, sometimes struggle, sometimes fail, because we give you real tools, not just theory. So when you have the opportunity to implement those tools, you can reflect on it. You can get feedback from your boss. You can get feedback from your employees. You can get feedback from the class. Applying it is so important. So it's essential that in any kind of situation where you're trying to develop as a person, you're learning a new skill, you got to give yourself an opportunity to practice it, because you're probably not going to be perfect at it the first time. and any kind of growth requires just a little bit of discomfort. So we challenge you to put yourself in that discomfort. Number 5, application. Number 6, this one's a little bit more personal for each person. But self-reflection is so essential. I think we've probably talked about it before. When I was promoting to sergeant, I was told, people are afraid to work for you. And I hate to admit it, but I was not as self-aware as I thought I was. And mentioned multiple times, feedback, mentoring, those things changed my life. Having other people and me, myself, looking at me with a mirror and being honest, saying, you know what, I'm not as good at feedback, or I'm not as good at delegation. I'm not as good at encouraging team members. Rating yourself, there's self-rater bias, so you're probably going to rate yourself higher. Or some people have the tendency to even rate themselves lower in certain categories than they really should. But either way, when you engage in self-reflection, you can grow, because it's kind of like the very first tip for making a successful leadership development program. If we don't know where we are, we don't know how we're going to get there, or how we're going to get to our goal. So self-reflection offers the opportunity to see where you are, and then you combine that with the goals that you set for the program, the 7 and 14 day goals. We know where we are. We know where we want to go. Another component related to self-reflection is personality. And look, there are a lot of great personality assessments, tests, concepts that are used in the workforce. I mean, DISC is probably one of the most popular. Another one is people say this is personality, and that's not so much, but the 6 types of working genius. You've got the Big 5, you've got Myers-Briggs. The one that I like the most is the Enneagram, because the Enneagram it's not just about observable behavior, it's about why you do those behaviors. And instead of putting you in a box and saying, oh, you're this number, so that's just the way you are, and good luck. It shows you what your strengths are, but it also shows you your blind spots, and it also shows you how to overcome those blind spots. For example, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, and one of my blind spots is that if I have a mental model of how I want something to go and it doesn't go that way, I will initially be frustrated. But knowing that about myself is key. So as a leader, if I have an expectation that something happens a certain way, but the person who does it, they technically do it correct, just not the way I would do it, I can sense initially that frustrates me, but then it gives me a clue and says, hold on just a minute, take a step back. Is this still a good outcome? And if so, is it okay that they didn't do it your way? Most of the time, the answer is yes. And so knowing that about my personality gives me room to grow in a way that doesn't put my employees in danger of misstepping around my blind spots. I'll give you another relevant example. Somebody that I was just coaching learned he was a 5, and 5s like to collect information before making a decision, which can be a blind spot, because sometimes the best thing to do with a decision is to just make it. Now we should go for a whole different podcast on decision making, but what he realized is that while collecting information and making sure that everything's correct is a strength, it's a natural strength, it also can get in the way if he needs to make a timely decision. So knowing that about himself is he said was actually one of the most transformative parts of the process for him. Self-evaluation and understanding your personality, those things alone can change lives. All right, so number 6 is self-reflection. Number 7, this will be our last one, is you need a competent facilitator and coach. I almost, I'm not trying to put anyone down. That is the last thing I would ever want to do. But I have a friend who works in HR, and HR sometimes gets tasked with putting on certain trainings. So he has no leadership background. He's never been a leader. He does not have any kind of leadership training, certificates, anything like that. But because the senior management said, we've got this hole with leadership, we want you to create a workshop on whatever. Let's just say hard conversations. That's a really popular topic right now. Okay, so my friend now has to, I of course offered my assistance, but he has to go and put together a slide deck, because that's a big thing. You got to put together a slide deck. You got to put together a facilitator guide, and then somebody who is not necessarily as trained to do this is going to take your people. Usually they do this in-house with HR, and basically what I see a lot is reading from the slides, and then the facilitator guide will say something like, what do you think about that? And so that's the kind of engagement. Look, that's better than nothing. I mean, it is better than nothing. This is kind of a controversial point. But look, I know that HR has so many different responsibilities: onboarding, benefits, any kind of termination issues. There's many different kinds of skills you need in HR. But when you compare somebody who is kind of a jack of all trades to somebody who literally does this every day, it's just a different level of outcome. So my tip on this is, if you want leadership to be effective, you need to have an effective facilitator and coach. And what I love about facilitating and coaching in these programs is that, since I've been doing it for a while, I can create a roadmap, but the way that the conversation unfolds each time is unique, and it is based on real world application of the concepts into their daily life, which you can't necessarily just do if you're reading from a PowerPoint going through a facilitation guide. So, not to beat that to death, but you need somebody who's competent to take your people through leadership development. All right, so hope you've enjoyed these 7 tips for creating a leadership development program that works. If you need help, you can always reach out, Charles at BlueLionLeadership.com, and we will see you next week.